A flash split the horizon, not lightning but the signal of invasion. Inside the underground command room, red lights flared across the radar boards. Static filled the air, and every heartbeat seemed louder than the alarm. It was 4:30 in the morning WT, the hour between fear and duty. Colonel Vasilenko lifted his headset, his eyes calm but heavy. The screen showed 8 moving dots crossing the border. They were coming fast, flying low, invisible to ordinary sight but clear on his map. Su-34 bombers loaded with modern military equipment and precision warheads. Outside, the city slept. Inside, a few officers braced for impact. They knew they had less than 5 minutes before the first explosion. In that silent countdown, courage became the only weapon left. This is the night when radar lights became Ukraine's heartbeat. The clock struck 4:25. In the command bunker beneath Kramatorsk, the air smelled of diesel and metal. The night shift crew stared at their screens, the hum of cooling fans drowning out the world above. Coffee cups stood untouched beside trembling hands. A faint chirp came from Console 3. Sergeant Holloop frowned. He tapped the radar glass once, twice, and the sound grew louder. Then, the radar began to scream. A line of crimson light burst across the display. Edit signals. Identical signatures. Moving fast. Oh, Colonel. Unknown formation crossing grid. Echo 9. Colonel Vasilenko leaned forward, his breath shallow. Confirm altitude. 200 meters and dropping. The room fell into perfect silence, the kind that precedes the storm. He pressed the intercom. All units, code Aurora. Prepare for immediate engagement. Lock frequencies. I repeat, lock frequencies. The operators came alive, hands flying over keyboards, voices tight with discipline. Massive screens flickered from blue to red. A command map expanded, drawing thin white arcs that converged over the eastern horizon. "They are splitting," shouted an analyst. 4, heading from the east, 4 from the northwest. "A double flank approach," Vasilenko murmured. "They are trying to fold us from both sides." The communications officer turned pale. Estimated time to impact? 5 minutes. Vasilenko's voice hardened. Deploy Patriot batteries, Alpha and Delta. Stand by for Iris-T, launch coordination. Contact the 36D6M long-range radar in Dnipro. We need the full sky. Omnal. The hum of power surged through the bunker as generators kicked in. Above them, in the cold dawn, hydraulic hatches opened, steel petals blooming in darkness. Patriot launchers began to rise, their silhouettes cutting through the fog. Inside, the operators synced the fire control data to the AWACS uplink. The screens merged into one unified field eye, a glowing digital battlefield. Vasilenko watched as the data streamed in, heart pounding with the rhythm of the machines. "We see them," he whispered, more to himself than anyone. "Now let us see if they can see us." No one replied. The only sound was the overlapping radar pings, the pulse of a city about to wake into war. 400 kilometers away, at Russia's Milrovo air base, 8 Su-34s had lifted into the dark. They flew like shadows, hugging the terrain, their fuselages painted the color of ash. Each carried the weight of war, 2 Kh-59 Mk2 cruise missiles, guided bombs, and radar jamming pods built to silence the sky itself. Their mission code was simple: crater the airfield, erase resistance. At 4:27, those shadows crossed the border. Back in the command bunker, Colonel Vasilenko's staff tracked every blip. "Formation confirmed," said the duty officer. 2 wings, east and northwest. Speed 900 kilometers per hour, altitude variable. The colonel nodded. "They are splitting the radar load. Smart." He turned to the electronic warfare section. "Activate decoy clouds. Mask the civilian grid. I want every signal funneled through military channels only. Yes, Colonel. On the giant wall screen, the digital map pulsed with layers of data, aquil blue arcs for Ukraine, red triangles for the incoming Su-34s, lines of code scrolled faster than the eye could follow. Enemy jamming detected, cried the operator at console 5. Signal interference rising in bands 3 and 7. Vasilenko clenched his jaw. They are deploying Chibini jammers. Counter with spectral shift offset by 2 MHz. The technician obeyed. Static filled the air for a heartbeat, then cleared. The enemy's veil had been lifted. 8 crimson targets reappeared, creeping closer. Range 80 kilometers, came the next report. The colonel raised his headset again. All fire units, this is command. Engage on my mark. Prioritize intercept of low-altitude entries from the east. Do not fire until confirmed lock. We cannot waste a single missile. He paused, staring at the map. The enemy formation moved like a pair of jaws, tightening on Kramatorsk. Overhead, clouds glowed faintly with the reflection of distant engines. In the bunker, every sound mattered: the soft tapping of keys, the hum of processors, the ticking of the war clock counting down to impact. 50 kilometers, said the radar chief. Vasilenko inhaled deeply. This is it. Let them come closer. We strike once out, and we strike clean. Outside, the first gusts of dawn wind swept across the launch pads. The Patriots stood silent, their canisters aimed toward the horizon. To the east, the first traces of the enemy's electronic ghosts shimmered against the sky. In the stillness before the storm, the colonel whispered, "Remember your training. Remember why we stand." Then he gave the order that would ignite the sky. All batteries, fire. The sky ripped open like a wound. Seconds after the command, the first streaks of metal screamed from the horizon. Kh-59 Mk2 cruise missiles cleaved through the pre-dawn haze, their contrails like silver knives. Guided bombs slid down from the bellies of Su-34s, falling with the deliberateness of executioners. On the command screens, red dots multiplied and converged, each one a sentence written in explosive force. Track 1, bearing 090, called the radar chief. Intercept solution in 34 seconds. Patriot tubes reared and couplers released. The ground boomed as canisters fired, and a moment later the air answered with a web of contrails, interceptors meeting incoming warheads. Iris. T batteries tracked lowers and flying threats with laser-sharp focus, their launches recoiling like coiled fists. Blows in weapon systems spun up, disgorging a hail of metal into the night. Inside the bunker, lights flickered with every new track. Operators spoke in clipped phrases, technicians read back telemetry. The soundscape was an orchestra of emergency, fan hums, keypad staccato, the soft bell of range confirmations. Each confirmation was a small mercy. They called them successful intercepts. 36 of them flashed across the board, but success had a bitter edge. The analyst's overlay showed gaps. 4 paths that threaded through, despite every countermeasure. Those 4 found purchase where the city was soft. A fuel depot, a stretch of rail, the edge of a residential block. Fire rose in a column so high it turned dawn to blood. 4 leaking through IMO sector. Charlie, Bravo, Echo, the duty officer reported, voice flat with the strain of controlled panic. Casualty sites, incoming. Men and women on screens watched their screens as if watching children at a railway crossing. They knew the angles, the velocities, the probable impact zones. They adjusted, they rerouted ambulances by voice. They opened corridors for fleeing civilians. Technology bought time. Human hands bore its cost. Outside, the first blast rolled through the town. Windows shattered in a chord. A fuel depot became an inferno. The heat, a living thing that peeled paint from walls and sent waves of shattered glass scattering like rain. Firefighters ran toward danger because there was nowhere else to be, and the sirens tied the morning together with a raw, keening thread. Above it all, the jets executed evasive spirals, flares blossoming in their wake. Electronic decoys sprouted like synthetic stars. Yet, the integrated defense Patriot, Iris-T, CIWS and the AWACS mesh adapted in real time. Data from radar, from ships and airborne early warning, from field terminals flowed in and was fused into actionable tracks. These were not independent tools. They were parts of a single mind, a coordinated reflex. These modern military equipment did their work with lethal precision and terrible beauty. They consumed targets, fed back telemetry, and demanded recalculation. In the command room, an analyst whispered, "We are killing trajectories, not people." The line between the two blurred as smoke reached the clouds. When the final intercept alarm stilled, the dawn had changed. The air tasted of metal and diesel. The scoreboard on the wall showed the grim arithmetic: 36 intercepts, 4 strikes. The cost in material could be counted in millions. The cost in quiet lives could not be summed so easily. Colonel Vasilenko watched the map and felt the mechanics of victory and loss coil inside him. He thought of the airmen who had flown from the enemy base, and of the families now moving through ash and rubble. Data had won them a battle, but outside the bunker, grief kept time with the same relentless pulse that had governed the night: rescue, triage, evacuation. These modern military equipment had shifted the balance. They had not erased the price. The flames still burned, and the city learned at dawn what the hours of darkness had cost. When the last echoes of impact faded, the command bunker fell into a deep, mechanical silence, the kind that follows exhaustion but not relief. The board still glowed red. On one side of the city, fire consumed the horizon. On the other, radar pulses continued to trace movement. The war had not ended, it had only changed direction. "Colonel!" came the voice from signals. Residual hostiles detected. 4 Su-34s retreating, low altitude, course northwest. Vasilenko turned from the console. "Be survivors." His voice carried no triumph, only calculation. "Prepare Falcon Squadron. It is time to hunt." Above, on dispersed runways, camouflaged under camouflage nets, 9 F-16V Block 70 fighters roared to life. The sound rolled across the airfield like an awakening dragon. Fuel lines snapped free, tires screamed, and wings shimmered under floodlight. Within seconds, each jet aligned on separate runways. A lesson learned from months of attacks. Decentralization was survival. At 5:51, they took off one by one, like silver knives cutting through the smoke. The AWACS in high orbit caught their signals and stitched them into the shared command grid. Falcon 1 to command, airborne and climbing. Falcon 2, ready for link. Data flowed altitude, bearing, radar lock, each element feeding the greater pattern. Inside the bunker, analysts watched the synthetic battle space evolve in real time. Targets confirmed, H's range 40 kilometers, descending to 2,000 meters. Engagement protocols? Asked a pilot. Vasilenko spoke calmly over the encrypted channel. Group 1, engage beyond visual range. Group 2, hold for mid-range correction. Group 3, stay deep, prepare for finish. The voice of experience was steadier than any algorithm. Moments later, the first AMRAAMs left their rails. Mach 4 missiles sliced upward, their contrails spiraling like silver ropes in the blue. The lead Su-34 banked hard, flares flaring like dying sun's eye, but the data link held. A hit bloomed in the distance, followed by another, then another. The radar signatures blinked out one by one. The surviving Russian pilots fought their controls, engines screaming. They deployed jammers, dumped chaff, tried to climb above the engagement bubble, but the network was too fast. Each signal from ground to sky returned within fractions of a heartbeat. "Contact lost on third bogey." "Splash confirmed," said the voice from Awakens. Vasilenko watched the last red dot limp toward the border. "Let it go," he said quietly. "No need to chase a ghost." In that moment, the battlefield went still. The air defense net folded back into its silent rhythm. On the big screen, only blue tracks remained. A low murmur filled the bunker, not celebration, but relief tinged with disbelief. For the first time in 2 years, they had turned a full-scale strike into an airborne victory. No flags were raised. No cheers erupted. The room breathed in the quiet weight of what they had done. Above ground, the smoke cleared to reveal the first fragile light of dawn glinting off the wings of returning jets. Their pilots spoke little. They had fought not for glory, but to prove that a nation could still stand beneath the storm. By 6 o'clock, the roar of engines had faded into the wind. Over Kramatorsk, the sky was still bruised with smoke. Dawn light crawled through the haze, turning the city into a silhouette of twisted steel and broken windows. Inside the command bunker, screens blinked in exhausted rhythm. The red markers that once pulsed like heartbeats now dimmed one by one, leaving only the cold blue traces of friendly units. The battle had ended, yet the silence it left behind was heavier than any explosion. Colonel Vasilenko stood before the main display, his headset hanging loose around his neck. "Status report," he said softly. "Patriot batteries, reloading complete. Iris-T online. Civilian zones, Charlie and Bravo hit. Fire containment in progress," replied the operations officer. His voice trembled only at the last line. Another officer stepped forward. "Falcon Squadron reporting 7 confirmed kills, 1 hostile escapes north. No pilot losses." A thin exhale rippled through the room. Not a cheer, but the fragile breath of relief. Vasilenko's gaze dropped to a side screen showing the city feed. Fire trucks lined a street that no longer had buildings. A woman carried a child, wrapped in a blanket across the rubble. Soldiers cleared glass from stairwells while medics lifted stretchers through smoke. The images played without sound, but the meaning was louder than the alarms had been. He whispered to no one in particular, "Victory is supposed to feel different." Around him, operators removed their headsets one after another. Some closed their eyes, their faces pale under the fluorescence. They had fought the battle through data and signals, but their minds now replayed every blip that had slipped through sauna. 4 strikes, 4 human tragedies translated into pixels. The colonel finally turned away from the screen. "Send all after-action data to Kiev Command. Begin debrief at 0730. Rotate the team. I want relief crews on site immediately." "Yes, Colonel." As the staff moved, the sound of footsteps replaced the buzz of machines. Paperwork replaced the chaos. Someone switched the main display to standby mode. The colors faded into a gray mirror, reflecting the tired faces of those who had kept the city alive. Above ground, the fire brigade still fought the last blazes. Smoke trailed into the morning sky, like the ghosts of the night's combat. Birds circled uncertainly, confused by the smell of burning fuel. In that fragile quiet, there was neither triumph nor despair, only endurance. The bunker had done its work, the shield had held. But outside, among the ashes, victory looked like survival, and survival was enough. 2 hours after the battle, the war room had changed its rhythm. The operators who had once shouted coordinates now whispered lines of code. The heavy air of panic had turned into the cool precision of analysis. Monitors glowed softly, showing endless tables. Speed logs, intercept ratios, telemetry from radar nodes across the country. At the center table, Colonel Vasilenko stood with the data team. A large projection mapped the timeline of the strike, every launch, every intercept, every gap. 4,027 intercept data points recorded, reported the systems officer. Average latency latency by 40% compared to last month's drills. Good, Vasilenko said quietly. That 40% saved a city. The phrase hung in the air, unadorned, undeniable. Screens replayed the night in fragments of miles, arcs of light curving across a digital sky, trajectories colliding in calculated perfection. It was beauty, born of necessity, chaos shaped by mathematics. These modern military equipment are more than machines, said a young analyst, her voice hesitant. They think faster than we can, yet they depend on us for purpose. The colonel looked at her. No machine ever buries the dead, he replied. Around them, printers spat out thick rolls of graphs and reports. Each line of data was a reflection of a human decision, a car, when to fire, when to hold, when to trust that the next radar ping was real and not a decoy. On one screen, footage from the Falcon Squadron replayed in silence, missiles streaking through cloud, targets erupting in distant bursts of light. The colonel watched for a long time, then reached forward and paused the image at a single frozen frame, an F-16 breaking through smoke, dawn light behind its wings. That, he said softly, is the face of our courage. For a moment, the room seemed to exhale. Numbers lost their meaning. Beyond the data, they saw what it had cost, and not just ammunition and hardware, but sleepless nights, families waiting for phone calls, lives measured in mission logs. Compile the final report, Vasilenko ordered at last. Name it. Operation Dawn Shield, Human Factors. Yes, Colonel. As the analysts turned back to their consoles, the light dimmed slightly, leaving only the glow of screens against the pale faces of the team. The bunker was quiet again, not the silence of fear, but of reflection. Outside, the first real sunlight broke through the smoke. The war room, for a fleeting moment, felt almost like a sanctuary. By the time the smoke cleared from the eastern sky, Kramatorsk stood scarred, but standing. Streets glistened with broken glass that caught the first sunlight like a sea of diamonds. Firefighters hosed the last embers, their silhouettes framed by the ruins they had saved. The morning smelled of ash and fuel, but also of something rarer, survival. In the bunker, Colonel Vasilenko removed his insignia cap and placed it on the table. Around him, the younger officers sat in silence, each lost in the echo of what had been done. The war room, once vibrating with alarms and commands, now held the stillness of a church after prayer. 7 down, murmured the analyst. 1 escaped. The colonel nodded slowly. That is enough. The city lives. He looked again at the frozen frame on the monitor, the F-16 cutting through the dawn, haloed by light. These battles are not about power, he said quietly. They are about persistence. For every missile we intercept, we keep a heartbeat alive. Across the walls, fragments of data continued to blink, proof of what courage and calculation could achieve. The machines had spoken in their language of velocity and precision, yet behind them were hands, eyes, and hearts that refused to yield. Military equipment had defined the battlefield, but it was human resilience that defined victory. Outside, the people began to emerge from shelters. Mothers carried children through streets still trembling from the echoes of night. Soldiers guided convoys past craters and twisted rails. In their eyes, fear mingled with an exhausted pride. They had witnessed the dawn and remained to see it rise. The colonel stepped outside at last. The sun climbed through a veil of smoke, and for a heartbeat the sky turned gold. He thought of the line every soldier learns but rarely feels: defense is the art of hope under fire. He turned to his aide. Send a message to Kyiv. Tell them we held. In that moment, it was no longer about missiles, nor strategy, nor military equipment. It was about what endured after both had been spent, the quiet courage of those who refused to fall. And as the city stirred beneath the pale morning light, a single truth remained. Modern military equipment may change the face of war, But it is the will of ordinary people that changes the fate of nations. When a nation wakes to thunder instead of dawn, peace becomes a luxury. The sound tore through the darkness over Kramatorsk like a blade of iron through silk.